How are the AFC depth charts looking like in the early offseason after the first initial wave of free agency? It's time to break it down here as we start another series on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. It's March, and we know basketball is crazy, but we know NFL has gotten crazy as well with the free agent frenzy, with a lot of players on the move here, changing the courses of offenses throughout the league. Running back has been a rather slow market. A lot of guys out there available that no one's really going after these veterans. It's usually the case because there's such high supply and the demand can be lukewarm, and you're going to look for bargain players of that position. There has been some movement there that we'll track here, but also some not interest in bringing back certain players on teams. So that's changing up the depth charts here, and some holes need to be filled maybe later in free agency or through the draft. So that's what we'll do. Look at the AFC depth charts here for you. We'll go through all 16 teams. And again, these things could change as we go, but we'll speculate as we go to see if this team could bring back someone, move on from someone, or could target someone there in this 2022 offseason to improve that situation. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available for you on all platforms. Okay, let's dive right in. What we'll do is we'll do the AFC, and we'll go running backs, and we'll go all the way through the Titans. So we'll start with the Ravens, go to the Titans, so we'll go in alphabetical order. We'll do this in a similar way with the NFC, and we'll go back and forth here, going through the four skill positions there of a running back. Still going to wait a little bit on wide receiver to see what action's there. Quarterback, we're also looking at what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, some other dominoes. So we'll start with the running backs. We can always add to this later, but this is what they look as of now here in the middle of March for all these teams. Ravens, let's start there. So they have two free agents that are not signed, and they were signed, we know, for insurance last year. That'll be Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray. So we knew they were not going to be back. This is also a good sign that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are recovered well from their major injuries that wiped out their 2021 season. So that's a good sign here because Dobbins, we know, had great upside going into the season. He had that RB1 appeal. Edwards was a RB2, RB3 flex borderline in standard leagues here. So they both had appeal. Gus Edwards had a weird incident out there in Los Angeles. But in terms of on the field and being ready to go here, just a bad break for the Ravens to not lose just one running back, but two running backs they had plans for. Remember, we were really high on Dobbins and we were really high on Edwards, and then it became who are the Ravens going to go to here? They cycled in different backs, including Freeman and Murray and Le'Veon Bell. Remember who they had earlier? Tyson Williams, and he was the guy that we were all going after. Right now, none of those guys are there. So Dobbins and Edwards, and we know one guy still behind them, and we thought he had some upside at one point, Justice Hill. So that's what your Ravens depth chart is looking right now. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill making it up with Murray and Freeman, unless there's a setback with one of these guys, and Hill's had a share of injury issues as well. This is how Baltimore is going to look like here in 2022. Maybe they'll add one more back in the late round of the draft with some special teams ability, but I don't think they're going to go after a veteran with this combination. The Bills, we weren't sure what to make of this J.D. McKissic thing. First, he left for the Bills, and then he went to the Commanders, and then he was thinking about going back and reneging on that deal. So I don't know what's going on with J.D. McKissic here with the Commanders. I think that's the best spot for him. The Bills, not very good here because Devin Singletary is a pretty decent pass catcher. He came on strong as a rusher and really carried some fantasy teams down the stretch as a solid RB2 with getting the consistent volume. Matt Breida was faded out of the offense. Zach Moss was kind of in the doghouse. He tried his best to be the power back complement here to Singletary. Now, that doesn't say that Moss could be just kind of relegated to a very limited power role right now. Or the Bills don't look for a veteran to add to this mix. Someone will be in there. But for now, it's Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. That's good news for Singletary. It really wasn't the focus of the Bills here this offseason. They got Von Miller. That was their big splash there defensively for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier. Offensively, they're going to move on from Emmanuel Sanders, Breida, get some of these older guys out of the mix. They did add O.J. Howard, so you get O.J. Howard adding a little bit of extra run blocking into this mix here for the Bills. So Singletary here is in good shape, especially with the addition of Rodgers Saffold up front. So the Bills are looking good here to run the ball effectively. So good news for Singletary and not any real threat to competition and workload here with Zach Moss being the number 2 still in Buffalo. Cincinnati, nothing has changed from the Super Bowl. It's still Joe Mixon in a great spot here as their lead back. We know he was an RB1. It's a fantastic season. Samaje Perine, that valuable swing guy, can work in the third downs of the passing game, can spell Mixon for stretches as well. And then you have Chris Evans. I don't know if they found exactly how to use him. We thought he could be a bit of a Chris Perry type in this offense, going back in the day with Rudy Johnson and that combination. But right now, limited role here because Mixon is such a good receiver. Perine, they like in those situations a lot, taking Mixon off the field. So it's leaving Evans with a limited role here for Cincinnati. So nothing changes there from the AFC champions. You go from Cincinnati, Cleveland, it's pretty set here as well with this backfield. Dearness Johnson, they had to tender him to keep him here, but he was very valuable when Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were not available last year. So makes sense. Swing backup, can play either role, can catch pass as well there. So Nick Chubb still the power back, kind of crossing over into the passing game role. Kareem Hunt crossing over into the power game role, but the better receiver among the two there. So Chubb and Hunt still in play here. I think you look at these guys, the key is staying healthy. There's a lot to be had in this Browns offense. We'll see if Baker Mayfield is at the helm or if they're a little bit more dangerous than the downfield passing game. That's also going to be opening things up for that Cleveland running game behind that really strong offensive line that is one of the calling cards of Kevin Stefanski's team. And finally, the last team we'll talk about here, it doesn't look like the Broncos are going to bring back Melvin Gordon. They've had some opportunities here. There's no reason to. Mike Boone is a decent backup. So right now, you have Mike Boone is the number 2. We know who the number 1 is, Javonte Williams. So we're hoping it's Javonte here, and he gets the early Aaron Jones career treatment and not the Jones H.A. Dillon treatment here from Nathaniel Hackett. So right now, let's hope that it's not Williams and Gordon again, because Williams was very productive, and Gordon in his own right gave us good RB2 return, but it split the difference between these guys, and you were wondering every week who's going to get the key scoring opportunity here on top of the yards they get from scrimmage. So looks like Broncos are ready to move on. New offensive coaching staff there with Hackett and Justin Outen. And we know the situation has also improved greatly, quarterback with Russell Wilson in there. So everything pointing up for Javonte. He was a pretty nice receiver last year as well. So if he's that workhorse duty, working with a quarterback the way that Aaron Jones played off Aaron Rodgers and Williams can do that for Russell Wilson as a check down guy as well when needed, on top of playing off that with the power running game, things are looking really great. And I feel Javonte Williams is a locked and loaded RB1 here that I would take in the first round in a lot of fantasy drafts as things stand in Denver. All right, we will break down 6 more AFC running back depth charts for you in our next segment, then close with 5 more. So we'll get through all 16 teams as we go in alphabetical order here to give you the update where they stand here after the early part of free agency. It is college basketball tournament finally upon us. That time of the year, March is finally as mad as it can get. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number 1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we will continue taking our look at our AFC running back depth charts with a triple shot from the AFC South, and we'll do it again with the AFC West here in this segment. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, time to continue breaking down these depth charts. The Texans, we're looking around. David Johnson, no. Philip Lindsay went to Miami. Okay, he's not there. Duke Johnson, oh yeah, he ended up in Miami somehow as well. Mark Ingram, oh yeah, he went back to New Orleans. Okay. Oh, okay, so this is the backfield now for the Texans. Rex Burkhead is your lead back, and he was pretty good down the stretch. And they just added Dare Ogunbowale. He was kind of the third running back in Jacksonville, but made expendable there with the return of Travis Etienne. We'll get and talk about him in a moment. But Rex Burkhead is your Texan starting running back. Now we'll see what this Deshaun Watson potential trade brings if they ask for a decent feature back return, maybe a Christian McCaffrey. We'll see. That's the long shot here for this team. But I'm looking at Burkhead and Ogunbowale. Do I expect this to be the same before we get out of here? Absolutely not. So it's just very messy indeed here for I don't know. This team is just so frustrating. Extracting running back value from the Texans last year was so painful. I don't know if it's going to be much better with this organization and making the transition now away from Tim Kelly, who had some clue with David Culley. I just don't know what they're going to do here. But if they go in the season with the Burkhead and Ogunbowale as the running backs, I know running back is not as relevant. You can get by with system dudes and put them in there and all that, but we want something good for fantasy football. So I'm just going to throw my hands up in the air. We'll see what happens with the Houston Texans. Let's move on to a backfield that we can trust completely here. The Indianapolis Colts, we weren't sure if we could do that last year, but circumstances led to this where Frank Reich had to trust Jonathan Taylor more. It wasn't a lot from Jordan Wilkins or Nyheim Hines. So Jonathan Taylor unloaded. He carried a lot of fantasy football teams to victory with his RB1 virtuoso performance here. Offensive player of the year for Sporting News. He deserved it. I mean, he just dominated and carried that team. And in the end, Carson Wentz, as a compliment to Taylor, was not enough. So Jonathan Taylor, lock him in for another big year. There's no more Jordan Wilkins. And also for fantasy football managers, no more Marlon Mack. So we're free of Marlon Mack and Wilkins here. So we'll see. They have a kid named Deion Jackson there. He's their third running back. So we'll see what happens here. Nyheim Hines didn't cut into the receiving work for Taylor as much as we thought. We'll see what they do at quarterback, but it doesn't really matter. His offensive line has to replace Eric Fisher at left tackle. He was not the strongest part of this group anyway. So Jonathan Taylor, things are looking up, and the role should not change here. For a very durable young back, just doesn't miss practices or games. He's just that good, and he will be the number one pick in most fantasy formats there for running back here in 2022. Let's go to our third AFC South team of the segment. You go from Houston and the H, Indianapolis to the I, Jacksonville with the J, with the Jaguars. And you look at their situation, it's still James Robinson, but tough injury at the end of last season. They kind of ran him into the ground, I think, the last 2 years. They just didn't give him enough help there. The blocking was a little bit questionable. He fought through it. Very productive back here the first 2 years. He wasn't even supposed to have a big role. Keep in mind, Travis Etienne, their first-round pick, their other first-round pick, I should say, out of Clemson, went down with that injury very early and was never available here for the Jaguars. So Robinson and Etienne figured to be the 1-2 punch in this backfield. Remember Urban Meyer and Daryl Bevell and that staff, and we're going to do some weird hybrid role with Etienne. I think it's going to be more looking at Doug Peterson and his committee history there with Philadelphia. It's going to be more James Robinson, early down power situations. Etienne worked in there as a change of pace receiving back in obvious third down situations. I think it'll be more traditional. They need to get Etienne on the field. They need some weapons here. They tried to upgrade them, we know, when they went after Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram. They're very serious about getting the weapons aligned here the way that Peterson wants in this offense. So Etienne, I think they're going to use his skill set, which is catching the ball, try to turn him into the kind of situation that we had with the Saints early with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, try to recreate that with Robinson and Etienne. That's what I would do. We've seen Doug Peterson use different guys. He's had Miles Sanders in there. We've had Jay Ajayi. Weird running backs for the Eagles carrying it. And he's very fickle, but also likes to use multiple guys in the backfield. So that should really lessen the value of Robinson. You're not going to get that workhorse status again with Etienne in the mix, stealing those receptions there in that dedicated receiving role. Definitely on third downs, and maybe cut into it in other series as well, because Etienne is a pretty good regular runner that he doesn't get enough credit for either. So those two guys, and then a familiar name in this Jaguars backfield. He's back, Raquel Armstead. So remember, he was Leonard Fournette's backup at one point. Now he's back in the third back here between Robinson and Etienne and Armstead. Again, Robinson and Etienne should carry and touch the ball most here for sure in 2022 if healthy. Now we flip over to the West there, the AFC West, and the Chiefs. And they are not going to bring back Darrell Williams, it looks like. They could have done so cheap in free agency, but they've been busy restructuring contracts, getting things aligned here. They couldn't keep Tyrann Mathieu, so they opted for Justin Reed. So I think they're done at keeping their own guys here. So that leaves Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and they did have Derek Gore return here. So looks like Derek Gore bumps up, and we know he had some nice moments there playing off Edwards-Helaire when he was hurt as well, playing off Darrell Williams. So we'll watch this. I think it's a big prove-it year for Edwards-Helaire. They used a first-round pick on him. I think it's a bit underwhelming. They got to give him more of that receiving role to feel better about it. I think Williams leaving, he was such a good passing down back. I think that's going to help CEH here there this season. So watch that. But right now, Derek Gore would be your number 2 back there behind Edwards-Helaire in Kansas City. We go to the Raiders. Not much has changed here. It's still Josh Jacobs in a pretty good role here. Kenny Drake, we have a good comparison there with Josh McDaniels coming over from the Patriots. Who are the two guys last year? I think you'll see a Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson type of deal here, only with 2 veteran backs from Alabama. So Alabama backs, they've trusted a lot in New England with Harris. So that should be good news for Jacobs. It's a very similar player to have a big workload here. But I think you'll see some Drake as well. We know Josh McDaniels is notorious for different roles and committees and having multiple power backs and swing backs and all that to confuse us in fantasy football. So it's definitely going to cut into Jacobs' workload. Drake getting the early touches because he's pretty good power back and also doing some more work in the passing game there. And we saw that with the yardage numbers for Jacobs in 2021. They also added Brandon Bolden. I think he's going to have a big role in special teams here. I don't think he's going to be the James White necessarily to the Harrison Stevenson that Jacobs and Drake become for McDaniels. I don't think that's going to quite happen, but he should have a few touches here because they have some trust, this coaching staff with McDaniels from the days in New England. Remember, Bolden just kept coming back and coming back. He would go to Miami, then they'd bring him back in New England. They just liked him as kind of a strong soldier in this offense, and again, very core special teams guy as well. So that could make sure that he's not as much of a factor right now behind Jacobs and Drake. The Chargers, they're got their 2 guys here. It's Austin Eckler. Justin Jackson is still a free agent. We'll see. They could bring him back. They have a lot of money. He's been a very valuable swing backup. Can do some of the pass catching Eckler does, but also complement him well as a power back. But Joshua Kelly, I think, showed them a little bit more down the stretch. They've had him on the roster here. He was disappointing as a rookie, but in this new offense, I think he settled in pretty well here for Los Angeles. So I think they could be comfortable moving on here. Know that Austin Eckler, he does have some durability issues, soft issues, a smaller back, hamstring, and all that. But I think they would feel okay because Kelly has some crossover skills as well. Look for them to maybe add a receiving back to the team that invented the Sproles role. I think they'll get one of those type of backs in the draft here to maybe be a truer backup with some power sensibilities here behind Eckler. So they can give Eckler high volume and feel good about splitting it between Kelly and a different type of scat back that can fill Eckler's difficult cleats at that position should something happen to him here and he miss games at any stretch in 2022. All right, we will break down the last 5 teams in the AFC and the running back depth charts as they stand here in the middle of free agency. Things could still change. We know that, but we wanted to get you where all these teams were. Before we do that, I got to tell you, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now possible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need in in a regular warehouse. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on the computer, choosing the only brand that they happen to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why'd you spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store car dealership when Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customers, and not just in the industry, but do-it-yourselfers as well? They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. I've found a lot of hard parts there for my cars at Rock Auto. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your own auto part needs. You just have to go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car, truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? They know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. You can find them at rockauto.com. All right, let us close the show looking at three teams back in the AFC East, and our S team and the T team, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tennessee Titans. So we'll close with all that here in the AFC, our running back depth chart outlook. Don't forget that we will have the NFC depth chart outlook next, unless we get some breaking news on the big quarterback, Deshaun Watson. If you missed that show, we broke down all the scenarios and what his fantasy football prospects could be on the teams rumored to be in the final mix here to acquire the Texans quarterback. So check that out there. The Dolphins were pretty busy here early in free agency at running back. One of the few teams that went out and got aggressive. They got Chase Edmonds on the very first day, right when the legal negotiation period started. They jumped on Chase Edmonds. The Cardinals kept James Conner here, but Chase Edmonds in the mix to be the Dolphins' lead back. This is probably not good news for Myles Gaskin right now. He's done, I think, here in this mix. Duke Johnson, they thought about bringing him back, but this Edmonds acquisition says no. Their next guy is Jared Dokes, a running back that they like with some upside, a seventh-round pick from last year. We know that Mike McDaniel is going to have an open mind. He doesn't tie into necessarily where a player was drafted. We saw it with the Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell situation develop there behind Raheem Mostert. So they like to have all their options. The best guy that works in that zone blocking scheme and runs well behind those athletic offensive linemen is going to be the guy that they trust with the nice workload here, 20-plus touches per game. So I still think there can be a committee, because speaking of those backs where we saw Mitchell and Sermon and a little bit of Jermichael Hasty, they're looking for a role, Jeff Wilson Jr., it was all because Raheem Mostert couldn't stay healthy. Well, the Dolphins added Raheem Mostert here on the third day of free agency. Interesting, just kind of a flyer deal, and maybe just having some familiarity. He's had those major knee injury issues, though. I don't know what's left. A lot of wear and tear on this guy. I know he hasn't played a lot necessarily as a dedicated running back, but special teams, he's been around for a while. So the age and wear adding up. So Mostert, however, the knowledge of the offense helps, because remember, Edmonds came from Arizona, not from San Francisco. So Mostert, a familiar face here. If he can stay healthy, he can be valuable, on special teams. A lot of great speed to help in that capacity. So Mostert is like the Brandon Bolden. He's going to always be around. If you need him for a bigger role, he's going to be there. Mostert has seen that bigger role, much bigger than Bolden in San Francisco. So can't sleep. We're going to, on this situation, we got to figure it out as we go along here. So we'll pay attention closely in training camp. Don't sleep on Dokes. And there's also Patrick Laird still in this mix on the depth chart. But Gaskin and Johnson, that combination, Philip Lindsay, all those guys cleaned out of Miami here for their rebooted backfield with McDaniel here for Tua Tagovailoa in 2022. The Patriots, status quo here. They brought back James White, didn't keep Bolden, but James White is there as a dedicated receiving back to help Mac Jones. Damian Harris, big year last year. Ramondre Stevenson looked very good as a rookie, crossing over, a little bit of swing with the speed and quickness there with Harris and White. So, yeah, Stevenson has some flex appeal. James White, PPR only, really deeper leagues there. You look at it, and Damian Harris still looking as the RB2 here, even though McDaniel's now in Las Vegas coaching that team. I think you'll see very similar results and usage here for the Patriots backs as we see them, and no urgency to add it back to this situation. The Jets brought back Tevin Coleman, a bit of a surprise here. So they still have Michael Carter contending with Tevin Coleman, and for now, Ty Johnson here. So we want to see Carter get those touches. They were coming along until he hurt his ankle there. Then they had to mix into a committee and different situations there. But Michael Carter was emerging as an RB2. Let's hope that Tevin Coleman isn't too much of a thorn in his side in him breaking out here in year two. And the Jets could also be the market for adding another running back. I think the Steelers will also add a running back here. Nadia Harris, a clear workhorse, workload guy here. He's looking good. They've improved their offensive line pretty well here in free agency. So good things up for Nadia Harris here in 2022 as he stays as a fantasy football stunt. First-round pick here as an RB1. Benny Snell right now is his backup. So what they need is a little bit of receiving juice. Anthony McFarland didn't quite work on this team. So we'll see how they mix it up here in 2022 to get a little change of pace, receiving pop here out of this backfield. Harris can provide that, and this can be good if it stays this way because Snell is more of a power back. That means Harris is going to see that massive 25-touch volume, and that is the MO going back to Le'Veon Bell from Mike Tomlin, and he's going to put that in Matt Canada. So this is really good for Damien Harris. We know, and the other Alabama back, Najee Harris, it's great for him as well in a much better situation with not a Stevenson type to worry about stealing his touches yet. Again, I think you'll get a limited receiving change of pace back that sees a few touches, but Harris should still be a 20 per game plus touch back. All right. Finally, let's close looking at the Titans backfield. Derrick Henry, right now, D'Onta Foreman, he's gone. He went to the Panthers. We'll talk about him in their depth chart when we break it down for the NFC. So Foreman is gone. He had a good ending to the season. Dontrell Hilliard also contributed well when Derrick Henry was down. Darrington Evans, the Appalachian State product, he couldn't stay healthy, and they moved on from him. So he's out of this mix for sure. They just couldn't rely on him to be that change of pace. So right now it's Trenton Cannon, folks. So the Titans should be in a market to sign one of these free agents. Maybe the Melvin Gordon would be there, but I don't think anyone they sign will cut into Derrick Henry. I think the biggest thing that you worry about with Henry is the foot injury and the wear and tear. Is he going to break down? So we're going to be paying close attention to this handcuff situation here behind Henry, because that guy will be a premium handcuff for sure. I don't think they're going to go in the season where, hey, Trenton Cannon is good. He's the guy that we're going to trust if Henry goes down. They went with a committee approach, kind of a hot hand approach last year. They had Jeremy McNichols too. So they need to get a little bit more bona fide, all well-rounded backup here in this mix here for Derrick Henry. So we're going to watch for that, whether it's a rookie or one of these veteran free agents that are available out there. Plenty there. It's not going to be Leonard Fournette, probably not going to be a Gordon type, but maybe a Boston Scott type. I could see that for sure in Tennessee as we wrap up our look at the AFC depth charts. Now, again, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We will take a look if there's no breaking news on Deshaun Watson at the NFC running back depth charts on our final show of the week, and we'll continue the series at these positions into next week. A program reminder, I will be off a couple days next week, so we'll have a little bit of shortened week here on Locked On Fantasy Football. So we'll take a break and recharge here and bring you more advanced scouting with free agency and the draft and all that, changing the courses of teams here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. That's the other big piece here of the offseason. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bringing the NFL Draft to life every day with inside analysis of college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is free and available for you wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer with our look at the AFC running back depth charts. See you next time. Either NFC running back depth charts or Watson reaction.